Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowdon Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette. And our guest today, this is going to be fun. First of all, Director General of TALQ, an English Anglo rights advocacy group, and Robert Libman, the co-founder, of course, of the Equality Party, now political analyst and columnist. Welcome both. Thank you for coming in.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Sylvia, I want to start with you. You actually had a chance to go to Quebec City to talk to Simon Jolin-Barrette, the Justice Minister, who seems hell-bent on his Quebec Constitution. So tell us, first of all, how did that go? Because I don't want to say it got confrontational. I don't think it did. But you certainly made your point. How do you think he reacted?
I think, everybody's made very good points. Both the English community and other communities have made the points that the Constitution is not the right Constitution. If you want a Constitution, maybe, but this is not the right Constitution. And Minister Jolin-Barrette listened to us. He said he was sad to hear that we didn't feel part of Quebec, and certainly not this Constitution. And
I want to stop you right there. When he said that, were you surprised that he said, "I'm surprised to hear that Anglos are not big supporters of this"?
absolutely not surprised. You know why? Because most ministers in the government tell us, believe us. We think you are part of Quebec. We think you're part of Quebec. So the answer to that is, so why are you proposing legislation, passing legislation that completely ignores us? And so walk the talk, folks. So I wasn't surprised.
But he gave you a post-Valentine Day present by saying,
right.
we love Anglos, we really love Anglos, and you're very important, and you're very much part of our culture, part of our province. You've done so much. Were you shocked?
No, because this is what they say, but they don't walk the talk. And it's hard to believe that intelligent people, like many of them are, they're there, don't understand that what they're doing does not correspond to what we feel, and they don't listen to us. They say they do, but they don't.
So, Robert, you've been fighting this fight a lot. I mean, you were fighting this fight for many, many years. How much of this is surprising?
Well, we hear often these love letters, like he told you the other night. He praised the community as much as he did. It made a headline in the Gazette of how much he loves and appreciates the Anglophone community. But at the same time, it's like leaning over, giving you a kiss while stabbing you in the back. You know, the legislation is very dangerous. It enshrines collective rights constitutionally. And this, of course, is of great concern to minority communities. You know, the concept of collective rights doesn't make sense to me when a constitution or charters of rights are supposed to protect the minority, not the majority. It's supposed to protect the minority against the power of the majority. So why enshrine collective rights when the majority elects its government and the government can do things on behalf of the majority anyways? The notion of collective rights is extremely of concern to the Anglophone community, and it should be vigorously pushed back. And I think TALQ is doing a great job, as well as others, including the Barreau, including Francophone organizations that are raising the alarm about this legislation and enshrining collective rights in the Constitution. And if he doesn't walk this back, we're really headed in a dangerous direction.
What I found very telling was that Daniel Turp, former PQ, former Bloc Québécois, coming out and saying, hey, you're not doing enough for not just Anglos, for Indigenous groups and all the rest. And I mean, that's got to bite a little bit when their own start criticizing.
Well, that's the way some of these changes will be made if he starts hearing from the majority community that they're going too far in trampling our colleagues and trampling real Quebecers who have been here for hundreds of years and have helped build Quebec, as the Anglophone community has done.
What's in this Constitution, or perhaps what's not in this Constitution, with respect to Anglophones? What's the main concern here?
It's the main concern that we had with the bill that passed last spring, Bill 84, on interculturalism. They say they put us in the bill because they put us in the preamble, but nowhere else in the bill do we show up. So I had a conversation actually today with Minister Roberge's office to say, you know, if it's only in the preamble, your policies and your directives after cannot mention us, cannot accommodate or promote our space in Quebec. So everything about this Bill 1 is wrong. They should start over. If we look at some of our groups and what they've said, they said, be sure that you talk about education rights, or be sure you talk about health rights. Okay, yes, but the whole bill is wrong. I mean, the Barreau du Québec, as Robert has said, start from scratch again. But the real issue is a recognition of the contribution of the English-speaking community in any legislation that they pass. And Bill 1 is like the pinnacle legislation.
And it's not only what's not in there that's of concern to the Anglophone community, it's what's in there that is of great concern. And the compromising or watering down of charters of individual rights and freedoms. There's also major sections on giving the middle finger to the rest of Canada as well. It says that Quebec's territory is indivisible, that if Quebec holds a referendum, 50% plus one is a result that must be accepted by other authorities. It says Canada cannot interfere in any Quebec jurisdiction. There's so many articles there that also create almost a de facto sovereignty association for the province of Quebec, which is of great concern. But for me, really, it's the entrenching of collective rights taking priority over minority rights that it should be of great concern. And what does collective rights mean? It means the primacy of the French language and culture, that the only common language in Quebec is French. And what does that mean for Anglophone rights going forward? What does that mean for funding of Anglophone universities going forward? What does that mean for English school boards going forward? And those are all major concerns that have to be picked apart in this legislation.
You've often talked about or written about the idea that whenever there's new legislation passed or new rules applied, it always seems to be, as an Anglo, a zero-sum game.
Yep.
The argument is always this is being done to promote and, of course, protect the French language. And then they do something that takes away something in English, which does nothing to promote or protect the French language. So this zero-sum game, do you think the government understands this? Because to hear Simon Jolin-Barrette say something like, we appreciate that all Anglos are equal Quebecers. I mean, at the end of the day, that means nothing, because the actions being taken by this government negate some of the things we've already gained.
Well, and this is something TALQ has mentioned for years. You cannot necessarily promote the French language and culture by eliminating other languages. And that's the premise here. And just before you jump in, one example that concerns me about collective rights is they're enshrining in the Constitution this notion that Quebec is a collectivity. So if you look at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it has a reasonable limits clause that allows the government to limit your rights if there's a broader social objective. It's like you're allowed legislating. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater for safety reasons. So that's compromising freedom of expression, but it has an overall objective. So and if you look at the signs legislation or the Supreme Court landmark decision in 1988 that said a government is allowed to impose the use of French on commercial signs, but you can't go so far as to limit English and eliminate English. And that says that there's a societal objective promoting the French face of Quebec, but you can't go so far as to eliminate English. Now, by having this collective rights clause in the Constitution, judges might easily be forced to say, well, because of this collective rights of protecting the French language, they're allowed to eliminate English on commercial signs as a reasonable objective in a society. And that's a great concern, that it forces judges to go much too far in compromising individual rights to the force of collective rights.
Sylvia?
I wanted to, of course, this is important. From a pragmatic sense, our community is very worried also about the attempt to reset Quebec's relationship with the feds. Mm-hmm. Because in the bill, organizations, institutions will not be able to receive money to challenge laws in Quebec. Not only that, for example, right now, the English-speaking community is faced with what with the construct of M30. Which is a law that works around the money that the federal government brings into the province. And so we have organizations now that have that could receive money from the feds that cannot receive money from the feds because they are already receiving money from the province. And so why would we are very worried about the federal government, who recognizes us as a legitimate English-speaking community, as a minority.
At times.
Well,
Sometimes
yes,
not.
yes, but at least there's a law. There's the official languages.
Which has been
Act.
compromised, as you know, recently with
Absolutely.
Bill C-13.
TALQ was
Very much
pushing
against
against
that,
that, and we had one savior that tried to save us, was Anthony Housefather, but it didn't work. But hey, we're stuck with this. But we have organizations that cannot receive money from the feds. If this constitution goes through, it's going to get worse. And we have a government, as I told the minister this week, we have a government that doesn't really recognize our legitimacy as a linguistic minority. They don't. They don't. They want a global transfer to Quebec, and then they would give it back out to us. What we know is they always take a ton of money, a large portion, for the consolidated fund. And so we don't get what we should be getting because they've already skimmed it off.
What's interesting is you're very composed when you in Quebec. And was he listening? Is talk? Is that actually make an impact? I was expecting that he was thinking that you would erupt, or anybody would erupt, and you kept your cool throughout. But at the end of it, does he make some sort of conciliatory and?
You know, I was. There's no point in baiting him or him. He baits us. We take the bait or we don't take the bait. I was not going to take the bait, and we are still trying to work with this government. We, as a nonpartisan organization, we have to work with whoever comes up on top, and so we try and keep a relationship that will advance our challenge, our priorities, and what we want to do.
But it can also work to his political advantage if he gets into a big fight with the anglophones, because they see the Parti Québécois as their main adversary.
That's what yes.
If they're at loggerheads of the community, it
so far that hasn't
nationalist
happened.
points.
Yeah.
So I think from that point of view, maintaining your composure is an important.
So
thing.
appeasement is a problem, but we have met. TALQ has met with the PQ. And, they asked us the last time we met, they said, do you believe in the decline of French in Montreal? So we said, it's nuanced. They don't like nuance. That dogma exists. But always we have to keep our cool.
But look, despite trying to appease nationalist voters, keep in mind 2/3 of Quebecers don't want a referendum, don't want sovereignty. So I think pointing out that in this Constitution Act, it's really, as I said, it's telling the rest of Canada, buzz off. This is really an insular legislation that wants to name its own Supreme judges of the Supreme Court, and basically says to the rest of Canada, leave us alone. We have our own way of doing things. We're a Quebec collectivity. Buzz off. That's what this Constitution says.
But what I don't understand is, why do they want to get an election is coming in March? Why does this have to go through right now? Why can't we wait?
It's a legacy project.
I understand it's a legacy, but it backfired big time.
But it can be amended if they lose an election. There's another party.
There's no
in power.
no amending formula in this. Either it's on or it's off. There's no amending formula in this
my point,
bill.
So a new government elected after this thing passes could do what?
Well, they can just by legislation in the National Assembly do away with it.
Repeat
right.
it altogether.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but that's even. So why is it that they? I know it's a legacy project, but it makes no sense.
Well,
I don't think the electorate
I'm not
wants
the
it.
political pundit. I have
Well, look
somebody
at it
next
this way. He backed off in a big way today on one of the clauses of the bill, which is the abortion clause.
abortion.
Why did he do that? Because certain segments of Quebec society that are popular, women, even the nationalist press, questioned it and pushed back on it. So he had no choice but to back off. When the Anglophone community rises up, as important as we are to Quebec's history, unfortunately, from a political point of view, we're orphans in some way. And when we push back, it doesn't necessarily make the waves or motivate the government to change their ways, like some other groups in society that are much more valuable voter bait for this government.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowdon Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the home of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowdon Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowdon Delicatessen. You know, I've often wondered this us versus them mentality. Do you think, maybe this is an unfair question, do you think that, let's say this government, the CAQ government, doesn't believe that Anglos as a group actually value and respect the French language, would rather see it somehow not be here? That's the sense I get sometimes when they say things, thinking that, no, we're completely opposed, even though we know, right, statistically, there are more people now speaking French or fully bilingual than there have ever been before. Does that message not get across to the government?
Well, go ahead.
I think that I think, you know, when the frame has been there and they keep talking about divisiveness and they keep talking about us, they, your comment, it's hard to get out of that frame. We at TALQ have established an unusual relationship with le Mouvement National des Québécois et Québécoises. There are elephants in the room whenever we talk to each other, yes. But the director of MNQ, when he went to the National Assembly, said, you know, in his brief and in front of the minister, why would you why would you be so harsh on the funding for the English-speaking community? I didn't quite say it that way, but it was there. He also said in his brief, you know, why would you say la seule langue commune au Québec? Take out the seul. You know, you don't need to hammer, you don't need a mallet to hammer the ant here. So we have to establish, we believe, more connections with the Francophone community, the majority community, to try and break down some of these myths, barriers that then become barriers to working together.
But the biggest frustration is their hesitancy of coming out and speaking up on behalf of the Anglophone community. When do you see Francophone nationalists do that? You mentioned the TERP example, which was surprising, and all of us, when we saw that, our eyebrows raised, and we don't see enough of that. And you would think that the business community or other sectors of Quebec Francophone society would stand up once in a while and say that this government is going too far when it comes to constitutional discussions, when it comes to language debates, and unfortunately we just don't see that. And to get back to your point about the CAQ government, you know, there's also a strategy involved at times where you can always pull out of the closet identity or language issues as a distraction from some of the other failures when it comes to education or healthcare, which are much more difficult issues to resolve. But it's, you know, to talk about identity and language, they know it's always a winning formula in some ways for them.
At least it has been. You think that changes?
It should be changing. You know, with the popularity of Mark Carney in Quebec now, with the concerns about what's happening south of the border, you would think there'd be more of a desire by Francophone Quebecers to feel part of a larger, stronger entity with the rest of Canada, and maybe some pushback against the constitutional or linguistic issues that have hampered Quebec's economy for the past number of years. We haven't yet seen that because people, as you know, Francophones are very concerned sometimes of stepping out of the family discussion and airing some of this laundry in public for fear of being ostracized by the nationalist media, which is very intimidating at times.
We have tried to get an editorial in La Presse for years. I don't know why we can't get La Presse. We're very, we're a reasonable organization. We can't get into the French media. We had an editorial about 2 weeks ago in Le Devoir, and I can't tell you how many Francophones wrote to me to say, wow, good on you. That was the second time Le Devoir published something. There's this culture, as you say, of trying to remain in a very narrow space.
So if you had asked them, would you come out publicly and come to a press conference with TALQ to speak about these issues publicly, they would really shy away from that. I can guarantee that.
Well, I'm telling you, the leader of the MNQ is very happy. He wrote an op-ed. We had an op-ed last year between between Eva and Fred. I call him Fred, and it came out. And he's willing to come out. I mean, we don't agree on a lot of things. But the space and the place of the English-speaking community, there are many more people out there who are willing to speak, but they worry about the backlash.
Always a backlash. And we'll see how Charles Milliard, the Liberal Party leader, handles this tightrope walk between maintaining his base and continuing the support of the Anglophone community, but at the same time striking a bit of a nationalist pose to grab some of those votes in the regions that he desperately needs to win.
But I think what's different today from years ago when you were involved in it, there's not that hostility coming out of the Anglo community. There's more, it's more a situation. Yes, we're here, you're here, we want to be together, and that's not the way it was, as you well know when you started
there's also a sense of resignation to some degree, but also young people are very different. The Anglophone community is very different as far as its mosaic right now.
But I'm saying there's not this attack mode that way back when.
To his point, I think that's a great word. There's that resignation, I think.
Well,
now
it
as
is
an
resignation to a
Anglophone.
certain
That's what it
degree.
is.
But that's got to help the environment a lot. Like they're not screaming, yelling matches going on back and forth.
Well, what's critical, 94% of Quebecers can speak French, and that includes a large portion in the Anglophone community. That number should be out there, not the decline of French in Montreal. The 94% should be the number that's out there of how many people in Quebec now speak French.
But
compared to
they
25
don't
years
like
ago.
that number.
They never use that statistic.
You know why? Because they say that number is insignificant. What they want is a number that shows that people, when they go back home at night, are talking
And they show
to
the number
one
about the
another.
decline of French continuing. They cite that as fact, even
Yeah.
though we know there are studies out there showing that's not the
But
case.
they would like Anglos, immigrants, whatever, to go back home at night and speak in French or just watch. They'll never be happy with just that. Yes, 94%, I think it might even be higher, can speak French, but that's not enough.
You know, Sylvia, you use a really interesting word, and I remember this because I spoke to Joe Ortona last week, who'd also been in Quebec City, and I read some of the back and forth between him and the minister, and I said to Joe, and you used the same word, I had the sense he was trying to bait you a couple of times, whether it's on the Sill and Common Language or a couple of other things. To me, that's the part where you can sit till you're blue in the face and say, we recognize Anglophones, we appreciate you, you're part of Quebec, but when push comes to shove, it's that same attitude about I'm going to try to prove that these people don't respect us.
Joe Ortona is on our board, on the TALQ board, and did a great job last week. And we have, there's a range of groups that went in front of the minister. But if we talk about the QESBA, they have gone over and above and spent a lot of money trying to protect our school boards, and that's terrific. And they've done it in a way, we believe, that Francophones understand. Many Francophones believe and like our school boards, many, but it's hard to say that. But the minister baiting is because, I guess, he wants us to get excited and say something that is absolutely ridiculous. And that's not the way to go with this government, or really any government. We want to have a proper discussion. Now, in terms of the community, I think there's people who are resigned and there's people who are angry. And somewhere there, we all have to fit together. We're not a monolith, as we all know. Some want to bring school boards together, English and French. Some don't believe in the nation. Some don't believe in official language. Our community is not a monolith. So we as a community also have work to do to advance our positions carefully and to be successful.
But the underlying thing is that our community speaks French more and more and more.
Absolutely.
And that signal should be appreciated and recognized by the majority here, but unfortunately it hasn't been. And that's part of the problem.
We're going to have to wrap up. I'm curious, so someone like you who has a history, you've been fighting this fight for a long time. Are you more optimistic or pessimistic now based on what we do have going on? We're just months away from an election. What do you think?
Well, I think I think right now the fact that the majority of Quebecers do not want to have anything to do with sovereignty is a positive sign. They may elect the PQ, figuring they can still vote against the referendum anyways. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. But I don't know. I think eventually, if with a change in government, things could look a little bit brighter. But right now, it looks fairly bleak for the community. I got into trouble with TALQ about a year ago when I suggested, as much as I would like to tell young Anglophones to stay here, I can't in clear conscience say to them that they're future is brightest here for many reasons, not only linguistically, but economically as well. I think TALQ didn't like that comment, but I was trying to say that unfortunately that's the case until we change the paradigm and the narrative a little bit to have our community much more appreciated as a component of Quebec society.
Does it change the government change that paradigm, do you think?
I think it would make a big difference if the Liberals came in, and hopefully Charles Milliard walked back some of the legislation that's done so much damage over the last couple of years. On this Corner Booth podcast a few weeks ago, unfortunately, he said that Bill 96 needs only some rejigging.
Right.
He didn't want to go so
Yeah,
far,
he
but
wanted
I'm
to
wondering if that's what he's saying now, because he's got to be very careful. He doesn't want to burn his bridges with the potential nationalist clientele that he needs to win. But we'll see what he does, and I'm fairly confident that he has what it might take to win this election against all odds at this point.
It's interesting that you say we're not a monolith. Wasn't long ago where we were always referred to in Franco press as angry phones,
Yeah.
and you don't hear that expression.
Not so much. And I want to say that the only way we can be optimistic is if we engage more young people. And we do have to figure out how to reach the young people. In my organization right now, we have more and more people under the age of 35. And we're finding ways to, on Instagram and to engage young people. I think that's the only way that the English-speaking community will make a dent showing young people who are interested in speaking French and do speak French. And to your point, we had 4 of our board members who are under the age of 35 who went to see Minister Girard. And I think that was a breakthrough. He kept referring to these 4 young board members as they opened my eyes. So, that for us, for all of us, I think it's the younger generation. If we can reach them and have them speak up.
Well, even on the Francophone side, younger
Yes.
Francophones
Yes.
don't bear the weight of these historic battles about the Plains
Yeah,
of
but
Abraham.
there's a poll,
and
Robert, that came out that
They
showed
showed
that they're in favor. I mean, it may have been an outlier. It was just one poll, but younger Francophones who like the idea of separation.
I think many who can't afford a home right now or looking for jobs
Yeah.
think, well, maybe this is a new,
It can't get
a
worse.
new opportunity. It can't
That's
get worse.
right.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
I attribute that poll to that potentially. But when all is said and done, I think support for sovereignty is way down right now. As long as Trump is in the White House, I think that support for sovereignty is going to stay pretty low.
All right. I want to thank you both, Sylvia Martin-Laforge, Robert
Pleasure.
Libman. Thank you both so
Thank
much.
you.
And we'll see you again soon on the next edition of the Corner Booth Podcast.